So very warm welcome to you. Our keynote speaker, Mr. Abhinav Thakur, is live now. I'll just give a small introduction of Mr. Abhinav
Thank you.
Thakur. Mr. Abhinav Thakur is a Managing Director of Accurex Biomedicals and the Secretary of Association of Diagnostic Manufacturers of India. He is a graduate of world-renowned University of California, Davis. And I think he's probably the only one who took over the reins of the company at the age of 22. So I introduce yourself. So please continue with your presentation as the keynote address.
Thank you, Mahendra, for the introduction. I would just turn on my presentation. So just give me a couple of seconds. Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for joining this important webinar today, where we'll be discussing about our industry and the medical industry and the way it's going forward. What I will be talking about is a specific subset of the healthcare industry, the medical device industry, which is the in-vitro diagnostics industry. As I've been in this industry for the last more than 15 years, so I would like to discuss about what, in my opinion, are the challenges and opportunities we are facing in our industry and the way forward. Change is inevitable. Adoption and adaptation and survival is optional. We have always seen that change is something that's always happening, and it is the species that adapts is the one that survives the most. And in the current scenario with the COVID-19, the change has become extremely fast and accelerated. There's a lot of innovation and investments that is coming into our industry of in vitro diagnostics. We can look at some of the changes that have happened in our world, in other industries, to get an idea of what is going to happen in the future. So if you look at the Blockbuster, which was one of the largest billion-dollar company in the US at one time, it went bankrupt because they were disrupted by Netflix. Similarly, if you go to the car industry, which hasn't changed much from the time of Henry Ford when he invented the Ford cars, and there was disruption that was bound to happen, and that's when Tesla came in and it completely disrupted the market with electric cars, which looked and felt and drove much better than the other cars. We had the friendly travel agent with us and who helped us book our tickets, and today we don't see that travel agent anymore or don't even hear about him, because we have websites like Expedia, Make My Trip, which help us to do our bookings online. Once upon a time, we had the huge shopping malls, and nowadays we see a lot of them are going empty and are going out of business, because we have Amazon that has come in and has become a giant in the world. And today, Jeff Bezos, the promoter of Amazon, is one of the richest people in the world, and Amazon has one of the highest valuations in the world. And especially during the COVID-19 pandemic, when companies were struggling, Amazon grew by approximately 40%. So that shows that the new business models are working, and the business models are changing very fast. And the person who adapts to the change, the company that adapts to the change, is going to be a winner. A summary of over the years since 2005, the disruption, the change has started, and it has become extremely fast. So, for example, Sony, Nokia, McDonald's, Blockbuster, and giants like BMW are also getting disrupted because they're not changing when the business model, the environment is changing. And a lot of us feel that our industry, the diagnostics industry, is not going to change. But that's not true. The industry will change. And the reason we are not seeing a drastic disruption in the industry is because our industry is regulated. So the regulatory forces play an important role in our industry. However, once the regulatory starts accepting the disruptions in the industry by smaller hardware, by more point of care instruments, is going to change and there's going to be disruption. For example, there are research papers that say that in the future, you will not need to send your samples to a lab. You can have a chip that is embedded in your body and that will provide you with the test. These are the disruptions which are going to come, definitely. The only difference is they're going to be slower in our industry compared to what we've seen in the other industries, which are not as highly regulated. Coming down to the medical device industry, as in-vitro diagnostics is part of the medical device industry, which is under the healthcare industry. Coming to the medical device industry, so the in vivo diagnostics and the in-vitro diagnostics is the biggest segment. As you can see, the diagnostic imaging is 30% and the in-vitro diagnostics is 10% of this 5.9 billion industry in India. And the fastest growing is the diagnostics industry out of all the medical device other industries. The importance of the diagnostic industry has never been felt as it has been felt today. The lab tests are only 2% of the cost of the healthcare spending, but they influence 70% of medical decisions. For example, OPD decisions, inpatient decisions, when the patient should get admitted to the hospital, when the patient should get discharged, and what is the therapy that is going to be given to the patient. This has never been more important than today, and the diagnostic industry has been in the spotlight because of COVID-19 pandemic, and we have learned that without testing, it's not possible for us to fight against this pandemic. Even the WHO has said, test every suspected case. That is the message for all the countries, that you cannot fight the pandemic without where the virus is, without blindfolded. You cannot fight the virus. Same without having the positives, you cannot fight the pandemic. It's very important to know positives so you can test, and you can treat, and you can trace, and you can control. So this is when the entire spotlight shifted on the diagnostics industry, which is a very small component. As you can see, it's only 2% of the healthcare cost. However, it influences 70% of the decisions. And in the pandemic, it even influenced higher decisions. And that's where the world realized the importance of the diagnostics industry. One of the greatest innovators of our time, Steve Jobs, had said this a long time before. He said, I think the biggest innovation of the 21st century will be the intersection of biology and technology, a new era in beginning. He had the vision to see this coming, and today in his company, the Apple company, you can also see that the Apple Watch, which has an inbuilt ECG, has made a big difference, and it has even saved a lot of people's lives. Recently, there was a case in India where a person's life was saved because of the Apple Watch. And Tim Cook, who's the CEO of Apple, personally wrote him an email about how pleased he is that he could make a difference to someone's life. This would also come under diagnostics, since ECG is part of diagnostics. Now coming to the global industry. So if you look at the global diagnostics industry, in 2020, it's an $83.3 billion industry. And the phenomenal growth is coming from COVID testing in this year. And 74 billion is going to come from the non-COVID testing. It's also interesting to note that this industry is highly consolidated. The customers are consolidated and the suppliers are consolidated. So 20 companies are earning 77% of the revenue, and the balance part of the industry is divided between hundreds of companies. The largest share is in the US. 45% of the global market is in the US. And that's because the US has high reimbursements and high insurance coverage. So this leads to a large market, and this is where the opportunity is for companies to enter the market. as you could say almost 50% of the market is in the US. The fastest growing markets are South Korea, Vietnam, Turkey, and Colombia in 2020. The two biggest players of the market are Roche and Abbott. And the fast growing companies recently, due to the COVID pandemic, have been Cepheid, Quidel, and Bruker. Now, coming to the Indian IVD industry, it's interesting to note that from March to September, 2,220 crore of COVID testing was done. And from October to December, on a conservative amount, 2,700 crore of COVID testing will be done. The total COVID testing will be 4,920 crore. And this segment did 2019. And in 2019, the total Indian market was 7,500 crores. So you can see out of 7,500 crores business that was done last year, this year 4,920 crores is from COVID testing, which is more than 50% of last year's business. Phenomenal growth coming from the COVID testing. If you look at the Indian market, it is one of the most competitive IVD industries in the world because there's no import tariff or non-tariff barriers. What I mean by import tariff is that our import duties are not an hindrance for companies to come into India. So if you look at other countries, they have a higher import duty, while in India, on the instruments, there's absolutely zero import duty. So every company that's operating in the world finds it easy to enter India compared to other countries, since they can be very competitive due to the low tariff barriers. And this causes a lot of companies from all over the world, the large companies or even the small companies, to enter India. By non-tariff barriers, I mean our regulatory doesn't discriminate against companies who are outside India and Indian companies. It treats the international companies and the Indian domestic companies at the same level. While you see in many other countries, there is a discrimination, restriction against companies from the other parts of the world. So, for example, in China, there are tenders which only Chinese companies can participate in. In Brazil, there's more encouragement given to companies that are based out of Brazil, that are manufacturing in Brazil. And this leads to a lot of companies shifting their manufacturing to Brazil, a lot of companies shifting their manufacturing to China in order to get the business there. So this is what non-tariff barriers are. And in India, these barriers are extremely low. Since our country is a democracy and we treat even the domestic countries and then international countries and the domestic more or less similarly. So this leads to most of the companies in the world entering the Indian market, and this leads to high competition, which is also a good thing because if we can compete in India, we can compete in the rest of the world. That means if we can compete here, we can export to the rest of the world because the high competition we're used to having here. As a total, there are approximately 70 FDA approved manufacturers since In-vitro Diagnostics requires the FDA approval. So there are approximately 70 sites that have been approved as per the FDA DCGI approvals. India has a very strong presence in rapid testing and reagents manufacturing. The rapid testing is extremely strong because we have a strong ecosystem for rapids. So we have the plastic cassette manufacturers in India. We have the paper membrane manufacturers in India. And these manufacturers are not only supplying in India, but they're also exporting to the rest of the world. So that gives us a competitive advantage in the rapid products. And also India is a large consumer of rapids. For malaria, India is one of the largest consumers of rapid tests. So that gives a very big captive market to India, and also then India exports a lot of malaria testing to Africa. Similar for HIV testing also, using rapid cards. In reagents, also India is big since, again, This is because of the strength of India in the pharmaceutical industry. India is the third largest in volume for the pharmaceutical industry in the world. And this strength of India has also got into reagents manufacturing, which has helped us because a lot of the machineries, a lot of the packaging material and the chemicals that are used in the pharma industry are available for the diagnostics industry, and they've got an advantage because of this. And that's why they've been very successful in the reagents manufacturing compared to the instrument or the hardware manufacturing, which is done by only a handful of companies. The Indian companies are exporting to over 150 countries, and that's how I would say that we are, due to the high competition that we have within our country, we are able to compete all over the world, and this has led us to export to 150 countries. There has been a lot of interest. If you look at the in-vitro diagnostic space, there have been a lot of companies and even private equity that has been investing into this industry, which shows that there is interest and the investors see that there's a bright future for this industry. If you look to CPC Diagnostics, Tosho has done an M&A, merger and acquisition with Lilac, where they have acquired the company. Similar for Perkin-Elmer, which is a large US-based company, has acquired Tulip Diagnostics based out of Goa. And Accurex, one of the largest diagnostic companies based out of Japan, it comes in the top 20 companies of the world, has bought out Span Diagnostics. And there have been other investments also of private equity. For example, in Agape Diagnostics was invested by Cornac Capital. So this again shows a large interest, and the companies who want to enter India want to get a footprint into the country because they want to get the manufacturing site. They want to acquire manufacturing brownfield projects instead of doing greenfield projects on starting from scratch. So it's easier for them to start manufacturing in the country, and they want to get a large distribution network. That's another big challenge in India, to set up a distribution network, which I will talk about why it's a challenge to set up a distribution network. The challenges that we're facing. Every challenge can also be turned into an opportunity. As I said, change is inevitable. Change causes challenges, but if you adopt to the change, and then we can survive and we can grow. So let's look at some of the challenges. These are the challenges we are facing on the macro level. By macro level, I mean the challenges that we are facing as an industry in the country, as a nation, holistically, completely. So, for example, infrastructure. This is one of the biggest challenges I believe that we face in the industry. So, factories need power. Power, electricity is the most basic need of a factory. And when you have power cuts, it's really expensive to run a factory, as you have to have inverter systems, you have to have generator setup, which increases the cost of manufacturing. And as our process requires a dry room, the continuous process of manufacturing cannot be broken, and the entire batch needs to be manufactured. So the connectivity of power is a big challenge for us and for other industries also into the manufacturing sector. So there needs to be growth in the power distribution in the country. Labor reform. This is a challenge that I don't think I need to cover a lot. It is known by most of the people who are into the manufacturing that labor reform is a big challenge, and that's the reason a lot of labor is on contract. And that's how we have also heard about companies that have been shut down in the past because of unions. Specific performance of contracts. India, in the ease of doing business, has one of the lowest ranking in specific performance of contracts. That means that if you have a contract set up between two parties in India, and the contract terms are not held to and they are not followed, it's extremely hard to go to court and get the contract executed. as per the terms and conditions. And that's because there are so many cases pending in all the courts that it's extremely tough to get the contract executed on time. You might get it, but it'll be over a period of time. And in law, it's often said, delayed justice is denied justice. So even though you might win and get your contract executed, but by the time you get it executed, it's too late and it might not even be worth it. A big challenge being faced is payments recovery. So it's not payment recovery only from private players, but also from the government. I've had experiences where it's tough to recover payments and it requires a lot of follow-up that needs to be done. And in terms of private companies who are not paying you, it's extremely hard to go and get the payments through the legal route because of again so many court cases pending in the court. So if you have a check bounce case, it's not easy to recover, even though a check bounce case in India comes under the Negotiable Instruments Act 138 and is a criminal offense. However, to actually go and practically get the payment through a bounce check, Section 138 in the Negotiable Instruments Act is extremely difficult. The government is doing certain things, like say, for example, they have set up CREDS, Credit Receivable Exchange Platform, that can help you to get your payments from the government, and also for companies that are doing more than 500 crore revenue. This is still in a nascent stage and it still needs to pick up. However, it's a good start and you can start recovering your payments through this. Ease of doing business is very well known. We have had a low ranking globally for ease of doing business. However, in the last 5 years, our ranking has picked up. It still continues to be a big constraint and challenges for us in manufacturing. We still have the license applicable, we need licenses, we need effluent permissions, and there are so many permissions. There is approximately 20 permissions that you require to set up a manufacturing facility, and these have to. As we saw that power is not continuous in India, and there's a lot of power blackouts which are happening, and this is a big challenge, especially for our industry, because a lot of our products are perishable in nature, so they need good cold chain. However, if the power is not continuous, the cold chain is broken, and the performance of our products can go down. So that's why the cold chain is extremely important. And there's a lot of layers in the distribution. As you'll see later on in the presentation, there's not a single distributor available pan-India. And you have to distribute your products through multiple distributors. So for example, you sell it to distributor A. Distributor A will sell it to distributor B, who's a sub-distributor, and B will sell it to another distributor who's another sub-distributor. So by the time it reaches to the customer, it has gone through 3 different channels. And which channel is maintaining a cold chain or not maintaining a cold chain is extremely hard to track for a manufacturer. And if the performance of the product is not there, it's happened because of lack of cold chain or not is hard to track. Now coming to the micro challenges. Micro challenges, are what are very specific to our industry. So as India is a large country and it has a large geographical size, and our infrastructure at the same time is not developed. So this leads to a high cost for operations, and maintaining a large sales and service team is one of the highest costs in our industry, and especially for service, because if you don't have a large installation base, it's extremely tough to maintain a service team because you will not generate enough revenue. And especially in the rural areas where 70% of our population lives, it's hard to get a densely installed base of instruments and service them. So that adds to a lot of cost and also high turnaround time for solving the complaints. So you need to reach that scale, that economies of scale while selling the instruments so that you can afford to provide faster service to the customers. And that's why you see only a few companies that are operating across India and who have a strong service network. Most of the other companies are operating in smaller regions so that they can provide better service within that region. Diagnostic labs are not registered. There's no single database of how many labs are there in India. There are estimates which vary from 40,000 labs up to 1 lakh labs. And it's a wild guess how many labs are really there. The only registered labs are the NABL labs, which I believe are somewhere close to 1,000 labs. But the rest of the labs are not registered. This is again a challenge because you don't have a single database of the customers. It's hard to estimate the size of the market if you don't know who the customers are. There's fragmented distribution. This is what I had covered earlier, with the challenge of cold chain. There are very few distributors who have nationwide coverage. In fact, I would say there's no distributor who has a nationwide coverage. There are strong regional distributors compared to countries where you deal with a single distributor and they can supply to all the parts of the country. Here we have distributors who are operating only within their local region or in their state, and that's because of the challenge with logistics. So companies need to have multiple relationships to have a pan-India network, which is going in the urban as well as the rural areas. And many of them are reaching only tier 1 and tier 2 cities, and the tier 3 and tier 4 cities are being run through sub distributors who pick up very small quantities from the distributors and supply them in the tier 3 and tier 4 cities. Hardware is in the hand of a few players, leading to consolidation. As earlier we saw, close to 20 companies have around 70% of the market. And if you look at why is there so much consolidation in the industry, it's because of technology. So you look at the hardware. By hardware, I mean the instruments and the analyzers. The instruments and the analyzers are manufactured by a few companies, a handful of companies, I would say, in fact, based out of Japan, US, and some in Europe. This leads to only a few companies owning the large instruments, the large analyzers. And because these large analyzers are placed on lease, or what we call reagent rental, the other players are not able to enter this market because they don't have the large analyzers. So this has led to a few companies who are able to create a strong entry barrier through the instrument analyzers hardware to stop the other companies from coming into the market. So 20 companies earn 77% of the revenue because of the limitation in the hardware in the market in the hands of these few companies. Low quality competition due to lack of regulatory framework in the pathology lab business. But what I mean by this is that we have regulatory for the medical device rules 2017 that was applicable from 1st January 2018. The rules for regulatory in India are harmonized with the rules globally. So they are extremely harmonized with the world over. So it's easier for Indian companies to export, and at the same time, they take care of patient safety. However, the challenge is that even though the IVD industry manufacturers are regulated, our customers are not regulated. So pathology labs have no current regulation in the country. They are free to choose products from low quality products to higher quality products because they're not regulated the results are not checked. There's no external QC done on the labs as per regulation. Hence, they are free to choose products which are even of lower quality. And this leads to a lot of competition in the market because of lower quality companies entering the market because of the low entry barrier. And this is also a challenge in government tenders because government tenders are based on simply L1, means the lowest one quote that goes into the government. And that's why a lot of companies who are able to provide the lowest price, however, it will not be the best quality, are able to get these tenders. A challenge which is very common in our industry is called the valley of death. The valley of death is caused due to the high research and development cost in the diagnostics industry, especially if you think of coming out with a new biomarker. For example, PCT for sepsis or troponin I. When research on these biomarkers are done, they're extremely expensive. And it starts from the idea, research, product development, and commercialization. And the value of death exists between the research and product development, where the cost of research is so high that after some time and where you're not able to develop the product, you run out of funding for R&D. And that's the reason a lot of innovation is not happening in India because it requires a lot of funding. Another issue challenges the dismal state of rural healthcare in India, where 70% of our population stays and only 8% of the medical infrastructure, medical personnel, medical manpower exist. So to fill this gap, which is very unique in our country where 70% of India's population lives, 86% of all medical visits in rural India are traveling more than 100 kilometers, and 70 to 80% is expenses out of pocket, leading to a lot of people losing their livelihood because of medical expenses. This challenge can be overcome by providing testing facilities in the rural India and making primary healthcare centers strong. That's the first point of contact between a patient and the medical facilities. And if the patient can be offered preventive medicine, as we are planning in the wellness centers, then the complications don't come, and prevention is always better than cure, and you can prevent the disease before it comes. This is a calculation of how a rural patient can benefit from saving money and time to treat his disease. Now, coming to the opportunities, everything is not an issue, a challenge. There are huge opportunities also that lie in front of us. India has one of the largest English speaking workforce, engineers, and life science talent. This can be leveraged to export to other countries. We have a demographic dividend. By that I mean we have one of the youngest populations in the world, and that is leading to a low labor cost compared to countries like China, where the labor costs are much higher than India now. Another great development has happened in India recently, and the first one was a medical device park that came up in Visakhapatnam. Dr. Jitendra Sharma is there today, who is the CEO of AMTZ, and they have provided an excellent ecosystem for companies that want to develop into the medical device or diagnostic space. The great advantage of being here is the ease of doing business. As I said, electricity is a big concern. They have taken care of that. They've also developed solar electricity, water, and also common testing facilities, common conference areas. So they're providing a lot of the common facilities, which is helping manufacturers. And this has given impetus for the states to also come up with medical device parks. And there has been a lot in Tamil Nadu, in Maharashtra, in Andhra, where they are looking at developing medical device parks. This is a big opportunity for companies, especially startup companies who are just starting up. And for them, it's a good place to go for incubation, where the cost of starting up will be much lower. India has been the pharmacy to the world, third largest in terms of volume and 13th largest in terms of value. It has the maximum US FDA plants which are outside the world, and labor cost in India is lower by 40%. This pharmaceutical success can also lead to success in diagnostics, since there are a lot of common factors between the two. Another area where India has been extremely successful is information technology. And a lot of information technology can be used for analytics and artificial intelligence. So this strength of biology and technology, as Steve Jobs said, is a new era. And the strength that India has because of pharma and IT can make India the IVD capital of the world. One example is the Swasthya Slate, which combined technology, software with biology and hardware. As you can see, this was developed here in India, and it can do multiple tests and be carried in a backpack into rural India. Success stories very recently have been the swab manufacturers. India was importing all the swabs from abroad, and the government and the private companies decided to start manufacturing the swabs in India to overcome the supply chain issues due to COVID. And coming together, they were able to manufacture the swabs in only 10 days, and the price came down to 1/10. PTM manufacturers, again, a lot of viral transport media manufacturers came up in India to supply it in India. And today, because India has a surplus of supply, the government has also allowed exports of viral transport mediums which were restricted earlier. So not only can the manufacturers supply in India, but can also supply for the rest of the world. There have been many companies that have got into rapid and ELISA testing and RT-PCR manufacturing. A lot of antibody tests are being made in India, antigen tests and RT-PCR tests are being made in India. And it's interesting to note large companies like the Tata, Cipla, Serum Institute of India, which were not into the diagnostic sector, have got into this sector now. And I believe with these large companies like Tata, Cipla, Serum Institute of India coming into this sector is going to increase the innovation that's going to happen in our industry, and the investments are going to go up. The way to overcome the challenge of high prices is to make in India. 80% of the products are imported in India and are being manufactured for Western countries at a higher price. If we start manufacturing in India, we can lower the price much more for our country, but also the rest of the world, as we have seen what has happened recently in the case of antibody testing, COVID, RT-PCR pricing, and transport media prices has come down significantly because of the Make in India campaign. In the end, I would say we are very fortunate to be part of this industry where we play a very important role. You have everything. When you do not have your health, nothing else matters at all. So with this, we are extremely fortunate to provide health to not only people in our country, but also people all over the world through contributing towards manufacturing high quality in vitro diagnostic products. With that, I would like to hand it back over to the organizers to take any questions, or we can take questions at a later.
Abhinav sir, can you hear me?
Yes, Mahendra.
Yes, sir. Thank you for such enlightenment on the IVD sector, the challenges and opportunities facing by these industries. So, I just have a few questions. You spoke about cold chain issues. So,
Yes.
how do you think of tackling them at a larger scale?
How can you think of?
Tackling them at a larger scale in India?
So there's some products which are like very high value and extremely sensitive to the temperature. You can get these temperature chain stickers which you can use on the products, which we have used for one of our products. And if the product is exposed to a higher temperature, you can come to know by the change in the stickers. And then there's also temperature change data cards which are available, which you can send with the shipments to come to know what has been the temperature exposure to the shipments. So
Okay.
there are certain solutions that can come out of it, and the basic is selection of the right distributors who are maintaining the cold chain.
Okay. Okay. Great. And I have one more question. You spoke about COVID also, COVID testing and all, RT-PCR and all. So, how do you think Indian government has, succeeded in tackling this issue of COVID as far as Indian, subcontinent or Indian part is concerned?
So the Indian government, I'll give you an example. The viral transport medium, the swabs that were used for the oral or the nasal samples were being imported in India. And there was a big constraint in the amount of swabs because of the supply chain and the import and the higher price also. So the Indian government got together with Reliance Polyester, and together they decided to come and manufacture swabs in the country. And within 10 days they were manufactured at 1/10 of the price. Similarly, there's been success in RT-PCR manufacturing, VTM manufacturing, antibody manufacturing, and technology transfer happening between the government and also the private players. Like, for example, what has happened in ELISA testing, and there has been a technology transfer.
Right, right, right. But sir, I think there are some issues as far as testing part is concerned that every third test is coming positive. So, how do you address that?
So, as you know, this has the growth has been phenomenal, right? So
Yeah.
close to 4,000 crores. And when
Yes.
you have that kind of growth, you have a lot of companies trying to enter the market who were not in the market before.
Right.
So you have fly-by-night people entering into the market, and there's been news of lakhs of tests being caught which are fake, or lakhs of tests that were being returned by the government. So because the market is hot and a lot of people want to enter the market, and it's not only in India, but it's also happened in the US where a lot of tests were banned because of the false positives and false negatives.
Okay. Great, great.
So I would say
But
that stronger surveillance, post-market surveillance is very important. So if you
yeah.
do market surveillance, you can come to know about the quality issues.
Okay. Okay. All right, sir. So with this, we take your leave. Thank you so much for joining us
Thank
and
you.
giving a keynote address. Means a lot to us. And we would be coming with all the videos in the latest days and we'll send it to you.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Thank
Thank you
you.
so much.
Thank
Thanks
you.
a lot.